So I've been working on the last weekly assignment for my African politics class, and this is roughly the entire first paragraph. Though I do have plenty of time to work on it as it's not due until Friday. And I've also been did some more work on my resume. I believe for my internship with the Monroe County Democratic Committee, as well as for an application to grad school, possibly. Though that may potentially be skipped. I recall doing most of the work on the resume during the early morning hours, for which I then asked the person I went to breakfast at Brockway again and asked if, and she was there again. I asked if it was okay if I put basic proficiency in Spanish on my resume. Because I do know some Spanish, as at this point I've taken 3 semesters of college Spanish, and by that I mean I took a Spanish class for 3 semesters during college. And I've also been practicing every day on the Duolingo app. I practiced quite a bit today on the Duolingo app because I had the oral interview with Professora Barsky today. Which is also why there was no Spanish class today. Although there was our African politics class starting at 9:30, during which the lecture was about corruption and how it relates to public policy. during which, of course, our professor talked about how different governments can have sort of... I can't believe I actually managed to hit the cap on Night Essence. I didn't think that was possible. Into your scrolls. This is essentially what I'm using to work on the resume. I ended up getting a pretty big breakfast at Brockway. Between that and when I went to Harrison Dining Hall at around 6:30 to 6:45 p.m. And I went for the breakfast at Brockway at around 7:18 in the morning. And I got to Brockway itself at 7:33 a.m. because I accidentally took the long way to Brockway. At some point in the early morning, I must have noticed that I had accidentally cut this thumb, and I wrapped a Band-Aid around it, which I kept on for a bit before taking it off. Maybe around an hour. I wouldn't say something like that about the Queen. She seems to have demonstrated considerable knowledge in the magic arts to me. The dwarves, they didn't upgrade my scrolls manufactory at all. So for encounters it is. I spent much of today thinking about working on my last weekly assignment for my African politics class, as well as doing some work on the 99th Dan Hamming. And I also did some work after my art class, during which we entirely worked on painting or abstract paintings. I'm pretty much almost completely done with the first coat of paint at this point. I stayed for a little while after class to continue working on painting. But I soon had to leave for my COVID pool test that I had scheduled at 4:20 p.m. I think I in particular chose that time because in a sort of sense I wanted to do the pool test after my art class, work on the painting, until it was time for my pool test. And then do the pool test and then go back to my dorm room. I found it surprisingly easy in a sort of sense. To provide the saliva for the pool test. I think it may be because I hydrated at least a little right before I had to leave for my art class. I've been spending the whole day trying to work on this armory, the effects of which could be seen earlier The reason why I'm working so much on upgrading one of my armories is because the very next chapter introduces a mechanic in which your armories now produce orcs, and if I don't catch up in terms of my armory levels, I'm not going to be able to produce enough orcs in order to upgrade many things, because there's a certain point in which orcs are required in order to upgrade things. And you'll also need orcs for negotiations. Excuse me. It looks like I've burned up my supplies from upgrading that armory so much. I'm just out upgrading residences in order to keep the population up in face of the population it's required for me to keep upgrading this armory. There's some pretty good buildings to collect during this event. It's pretty fun. They shuffle the slots at random, so it doesn't really matter in which order you go in. Getting this kombucha made it a bit more expensive for me to get the meal from the nest tonight. Yeah, but it was worth it. I went to the nest at, I would say, around 10:15 p.m. And at the nest, I got all this. Another free bag of popcorn, a kombucha, and I believe, yellow or peach flavored Mountain Dew Rise energy drink that I plan on having later. This seems to be a relatively good strategy. Shenanigans with sheep. I prefer ones that give population to ones that are straight up just culture. I already have more than enough culture. Got some sword acrobats. And that's the first Fairy Queen's Retreat artifact. But I don't currently have a slot to put it on. At last I got the daily exclusive. And the bathrooms decorative building. With that, I don't think I need that Halloween themed item anymore. Though it'll be a bit hard to find. Okay, I'm constructing it now. Despite being smaller, it still has more population than the old building. It can still be considered nature-themed. It takes about a couple of minutes to make these cracker sandwiches. Also, in the beginning of art class, I had asked for a copy of essentially this Elements of Design project, the guidelines for the abstract painting, essentially, but the professor did have a copy of it, but then I decided to not take it because it seemed like it was raining outside. And I then realized again that I already had, that I confirmed through my memory that I had a copy of the guidelines back in my dorm room. I asked in response to La Professora mentioning the guidelines and the PowerPoints. In the vein of our upcoming writing assignment, which has low priority right now in comparison to studying for my Spanish quiz right now. As well as the week 13 African politics assignment and the post-mortem essay assignment, for which I'm not even entirely sure on what major security failure from either the 20th or 21st century to pick yet. Though there's a good chance it will be the Battle of Grozny. This is just part of what I talked about during the 8-minute Spanish oral interview I had with Barsky. She was a little late, which added to the nervous feelings I felt. But thankfully, she did ultimately call me on Microsoft Teams, and we had the oral interview, during which I talked about not only about how I'm busy or ocupado this week, but also about how my dad has had a recent tendency to either pick me up on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on if my Spanish class is online or in person. And that, in a sense, because my Spanish class is only going to be in person from now on, my dad is only going to pick me up on Thursdays from here on out. Thursdays at the earliest. I talked quite a bit about those 2 assignments I have due by essentially, I said the end of Friday. 6 p.m. is pretty late, but I wouldn't exactly call it the end of Friday, but still pretty close to the end of Friday. And that post-mortem essay I have until 11:59 p.m. on Friday for. I also mentioned studying for the Spanish exam again that I have on Thursday, which at this point I'm assuming is going to be based on lessons 15 and 16. And the first order of business for studying for it is to study the vocab for those two chapters.